It's not what you do that matters. It's how you do that matters the most. And a shared leadership framework is really impactful because it helps you build the capacity for change, but it also has helped you as a leader to build those relationships with your staff and with your students that ultimately can have the impact that we need for those equitable outcomes for our kids. This is the one thing I want to say: equity isn't about access, it's about outcomes. So what are we doing to provide those equitable outcomes for kids?
You've been listening to Kimberley Miles, principal of East Gresham School in Oregon. I'm Stan Baker, one of the hosts of Circle Forum, along with Shelley Steele and Steve Young. Kimberley gives us some terrific examples from her school about how she collaborates with staff in a shared leadership approach. It really builds teacher capacity for change and builds those relationships with staff. Shared leadership focuses on equitable outcomes for each student.
This podcast is brought to you by the word shared, which comes from Old English meaning a division or a portion. Psychological research shows that sharing can lead to increased happiness and well-being. It fosters connection, community, reduces stress, and builds strong, resilient communities. What's not to like about this for a school?
At the end of this episode, be sure to visit our website, www.restorative.ca, where you'll find all kinds of great resources for leadership in schools from a restorative relational perspective. If you enjoy this episode, make sure you subscribe. Shelley's away, so let's head over to this discussion with Steve and me, Stan. Do you have a story of how you overcame some of the obstacles, maybe even identifying some of the obstacles to making these kinds of changes?
I think one of the things that when we started our turnaround, changing mindsets, changing our thinking is always hard. You do what you love, and some of these things are dear to your heart. And so how do you, even as a leader, how do I do things differently? I'm still learning too. One of the things that we learned along our journey was the positive behavior instructional support systems worked for the majority of our kids, but it didn't work for everybody. So we facilitated those restorative justice practices that empowered kids. What happened? What do you need in order to fix this? How can I help? Those kinds of thinkings, doing what we have always done in the past to moving towards what our kids need. Oh, I have to move away from familiar to something that's more difficult, much more challenging, that requires more learning. So that's just one example. Helping teachers, that's just for me personally, moving from enhancing our PBIS practices to restorative practice, or embedding the two together. That was learning for me, right? And what's so exciting is empowering our students to make those decisions for themselves and to see that trajectory of empowerment for them. I'm not going to fix all your problems. I'm going to empower you with those thoughts. So like, what can you do and how can I help you? But I'm not going to solve your problems for you. And that's empowering for a kid. It's, oh, I got to struggle a little bit. I got to figure this out, but I know I have help. And the other thing is what's been really difficult is helping teachers see sometimes what they've done or what they are doing doesn't have the impact that they'd hoped for. And so really together we became, like I mentioned before, assessment literacy. We really determine how do we use data as a tool to fine tune what we do, and how do we do it in a way that really makes a difference. And looking at those focal groups, do we have the same impact for all of our kids? And we don't like to use the word all, we like to use the word each, because it personalizes it, right? Not just for the majority of our kids, our students of color, our boys, or whatever focus group or focal group we want to look at. Are we making that impact for each of our learners?
You talked about not wanting to do things to teachers, but having them want to do those things. And how do you do that? You talked about the old way of doing things and gravitating to the new. I'm sure some of your teachers said, that's not how we've done this before. How did they pick up on that from you and then move towards that model where they would say, here's what I want to do?
So I'm going to give you an example of early literacy. So moving away from how I taught children how to read to what we know the science of reading tells us what we need to do differently or more of. So we really dove deep into some professional learning, and I was there right with them. So we attended an initial training. I went into classrooms and practiced as well and tried to get really good at this instructional routine. And then, okay, so a shared leadership frameworks, they're teaching those much more often than I am. So what we did is the professional learning didn't stop. It was ongoing. We brought in instructional coaches. They attended more professional learning. Of course, I went to them as often as I could, but then they became the instructional leaders. They became the experts. They taught me. No, they calibrated together. They provided that equitable framework so that each of our kids received the instruction in the same way. And I was there with them, but they became the experts. And so I've stepped away. They're the instructional leaders of this early literacy, and I support and facilitate as much as I can, but they're the ones that are really building the momentum and having those critical conversations with their colleagues, that not just top down, but it's side by side. They're having, this is why we do what we're doing, and this is the impact that I've experienced with my kids, and let's do it together. They're doing peer-to-peer observations. They're giving each other feedback. They're fine-tuning that every little routine and etc. And they're building their own network of expertise. And it's now, we were doing that K2, our 3rd through 5th grade teachers realized that they too needed that foundational skill knowledge of how to implement phonics, phonemic awareness instruction for some of their kids. And so our kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers help them understand the benefits of. And so it's just grown. It's just this impact of instructional leaders that's not just from me, it's from many of our staff. And they have people that they can go to and clarify and ask questions. And it's so exciting because it's not just me telling you what to do. It's us building the understanding together. Just one example of a shared leadership framework that has really been impactful. It helps my workload, to be honest, but it just feels so good for them. They've given me feedback that it feels so good that you trust me, that I can do this, that I can share what I know with my colleagues. As a teacher, that's got to feel great, right? It's got to feel empowering that I know what I'm doing, and I'm here to help them, and I'm here to support them with what they need, but they're asking each other the hard questions. They're giving each other that feedback. And it's, our student performance data is definitely showing its effectiveness.
Now, you mentioned when we talked before that you're actually preparing for a new math approach.
Mhm.
Can you describe what you already set up? Because you talked a little bit about setting that up already this school year. What did you do?
Right. So we know that there's a new math curriculum coming down the pipeline. It happens every 3 to 4 years. And so it was proposed to me, like, do you have any teachers who would like to pilot it? And so again, I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking, you bet I do. I don't know yet, but you bet I do. So I proposed it to my 1st grade team, and they were just really excited. So yeah, I want to try it because their current adoption wasn't what their 1st graders needed. So they have all this last year have been attending this professional learning of this new math adoption. And now they're becoming the instructional leaders. So they have talked with not only their 1st grade team, but our school teacher, instructional staff, about what are the elements that are different from the old adoption to the new adoption. And they've been piloting this for 6 months. And so when we roll over to the new adoption, I've already strategically built instructional leaders for this new curriculum in our school community where people can go to and ask clarifying questions. And again, these 2 kindergarten teachers, actually, they're both new to the profession of teaching, but they're now the experts in this new adoption, new math instructional strategies. And even our new teachers need to be I like to say fed well, and they're so excited, and their excitement is contagious, right? It's like, rather than, oh, another new adoption, it's, wow, I can't wait to show you this component and this instructional element that they've included that we asked about. And so it's just this momentum of change that we grew first from within, and then it's spreading to all the instructional staff, classroom teachers.
Now, you mentioned a number of times that teachers will move on to different pathways, whether that's to another admin position or coaching or a system consultant. What has shared leadership done to teacher retention in your school?
It's been really great. When we first did the initial turnover, it was hard. When we first did the turnover, when you do a federally funded turnover, half have to leave and half stay. And then you interview the staff that wants to stay. And even those staff members weren't all selected to stay. And so initially there was high turnover, but as we did this work together, they didn't leave. So here you have a school community where student performance data wasn't where it should be yet. And that's an important word that we like to say, yet. But providing them with all this ongoing professional learning, it was empowering for them, is what the word that they're saying to me. It felt good that you're trusting me again to facilitate this hard work, but you're providing me with ongoing professional learning so that I really understand the why and the what and the how to facilitate this change. Initially, there was no turnover, which is really strange in a turnover of staff in a big change. But as I head towards my 10th year, all of these teachers are now really fine-tuned instructional leaders. They're finding their own pathways, whether it be a principal, whether it be a teacher in a new community or wherever. And I think it's great. It's hard to see them go, but I'm really excited to see where they head next.
What do you look for to tap somebody in the shoulder to say, you know what, I think you'd be pretty good at this? Or have you ever considered something? What are the characteristics or the skills that you look for?
So one of the positions in our school is a teacher on special assignment, and they help us implement PBIS and support students' success with, it's not really an AP, it's a certified teaching position, but they're not in the classroom anymore. They're all over the school helping kids make good choices and regulate and all the things. And when I selected this person to move out of the classroom, I really was looking for a person who had really strong connections and built relationships with kids. And this person was in this TOSA, teacher on special assignment position, for several years. But I knew within a year that this person was off to do much better things, a principalship. And so I continued to encourage, when are you going to take that coursework? When are you going to fulfill those requirements so that you could move on? That's one example. Another example, which I think is really an important resource that all of we have, is our educational assistants. When you meet those educational assistants who are so amazing with children, who really see the children and who they are and are able to be outside at recess, in the lunch or in small group instruction, who are just what we need in our classrooms, you nurture that. You plant a seed. You are all that feedback that you're giving them for their observations. You need to be a teacher. How can I support you on your pathway to becoming a teacher? One example that we had is an instructional assistant who took 6 years to do her coursework because she was a young mother and she had family, but every summer she did 2 or 3 classes. And it was 6 years or so that she fulfilled her requirements, and including her master's degree, she is now a first-grade teacher in our school community, because she knows our kids, she knows the school community, and she is a strong instructional leader in her classroom. Here's another example. I have a kindergarten teacher. She's going to be a principal one day. I just know it, and I keep telling her that. It's like, when you're a principal, this is why I make the decision I do for early literacy or PBIS or whatever. So I'm purposely having those comments with her so that she knows, understanding what a principal does and why, and the why behind the decisions I make. When you become a principal, this is something that you can consider. And she's a young mother, so she's not there yet, but I'm planting that seed. So it's finding them, planting those seeds, having those conversations. And most importantly is you're a listener. You sit back and you listen to where their passions are. And we've had 8 instruction over my career in just this one school. We've had 8 instructional assistants become teachers.
I wanted to ask for some of the language and words that you use
Mhm.
in conversations using the principal's mindset of shared leadership. You mentioned talking to a teacher where the impact of their actions were not necessarily what they intended. And I'm just wondering, what kind of language would you use in having a conversation with a teacher where their impact and their intention don't necessarily line up?
So I'm always asking questions. So, and they know that when I say, tell me more, we're in for a conversation, right? Help me understand. And when I have these conversations, I'm always reflective of the impact that their actions had on student. For instance, an informal observation, I'm looking at students and what they're doing. And I would, and I take notes and I list all the things that I observe students doing. And I know that when we've talked previously, they've shared their grade level outcome goals with me. And these are the actions that I saw students doing today. Tell me more about how did this support their reaching their outcome goals. And the pause, right? The pause is important. They have to have that productive struggle. And they're smart people, they know. And so it just gives them an opportunity to reflect, and they provide me with what their thinking was. And then I said, okay, so tell me more. So I listen. And then I try to pick up something that they said. Oh, that's such a great idea. I say, oh, that was really interesting. You need to have more feedback with your, or whatever the strategy is. That is a great idea. I'm going to come back. I'm going to let you play around with that. I'm going to come back and I'm going to see that strategy, and I will give you impact on what I saw students doing when you use that strategy.
I love the fact that you start with questions. That really fits and resonates with both of us for sure, because questions really lead restorative practices and restorative justice too, like what's been happening. And the question, what do you think? What's the impact been, right? So what do you think the impact is? And what do you think we should do from here? Are really excellent questions to start with and to use in those kinds of conversations too.
And I think it's also really important that I'm visible in the classrooms often. I'll take my laptop with me, and I know that everybody talks about that, but it's really real. You just need to be like, I don't want to come into the classroom and have, oh, the principal's here. Like I'm wallpaper, and the kids know. I just don't want to, they know we have a signal like this, and they can wave to me, but that's it. And I just want to see, I want to see them in action. They know. And so it's really important that I'm in there often, so I see those patterns of what's really happening.
For those periods of time when you want to be somewhere to do something. And I would tell my secretary, I'm going to be in classrooms the next half an hour. I'm going to be in this classroom. If you're looking for me, that's where I'll be. And I had to block that time. It was intentional time, but important time. And the other time it was always recesses. I was out in the yard all the time. That intentionality, how much of that do your staff see you being very intentional in your work, as opposed to somebody just dropping in?
We're all focused in on literacy. That's our social justice work, is literacy. And so they know that I'm going to be out and about during the literacy block. I just make myself, that's where I'm at, and just bring the laptop with me and do the work. So they pretty much know. And I've built that habit early on that I'm just in and out. I don't tell them when I'm coming. I just come. Or if they want to show me something, I'll try to be there or read to a student or whatever it is. One thing that we really haven't talked about yet, and I don't want to switch gears here, but it's really important, is A principal, you guys know, we have so much to do and it's just ridiculous, right? And it seems like it's getting more and more of our time away from there. So we talked about shared leadership. There's also another capacity for leadership that I, as a building principal, think about is we have amazing office staff. They are incredible folks and they're classified staff members, but I try to give away as much of my busy work as possible. For instance, I'll own this. I don't do the building schedule. I don't have that much time in my life, my day. I'm very fortunate this last year, we had our first AP, and so they take care of that. So I try to give away as many of those projects to staff members who are passionate about that. And so whether it be our multicultural nights, whether it be our parent involvement nights, I give that all as much as I can away so that my time is freed up to be in the classrooms, to be intentional with instruction. And I know that's not popular, but it is what I have relentlessly prioritized because I have to have a balance too in my life. And I can't just bring it home and work till 10 o'clock at every night, like I do sometimes. I have to find those other people in our building that want to learn and grow and do different things. And I give that work away so I can intentionally, use your word, in the classroom, purposefully in the classroom. Give it away as much as you can. We also have a couple of school counselors who are really passionate about social emotional learning work and doing student surveys and all of those wonderful things. Give it away. That is their passion, that's their heart, and these counselors are learning and growing and thriving because they're learning more about our kids through these surveys. Not that I don't want to know that, they'll share the data with me, but that's their passion project. So find those pockets that you can give away.
I appreciate the conversation we've had. I always find it interesting to talk to people in different jurisdictions just to see structurally how education is delivered. I appreciate the shared leadership piece. That's the work that you're continuing to do, because to me, as you said, you've got to share the workload because you can't do it all yourself. And to be effective, to change the outcomes for children, we all have to be working together.
Kimberley's story demonstrates how integrating restorative practices and things like PBIS can empower students and help staff to address student needs holistically. As Kimberley's examples illustrate, shared leadership continues to develop the learning of all the adults in the building, the principal and the teachers. Find out more about our work with restorative practices and ways to share leadership at www.restorative.ca. Email me, stan@restorative.ca. Shared leadership reflects how you do things, not just what you do in school, and that has an impact on your school's capacity for change.